was his dream? Did it actually come true? Right. So everyone
Mm.
remembers this "I have a dream" speech. And, he wanted, black boys and black girls to be able to hold hands with white boys and white girls. And, it was a beautiful thing. And at the
Mhm.
inauguration, it was like you have this black and Indian American vice president. You had, LGBT, like there was like trans women appointed to certain positions. You had a Latinx woman in J Lo who, sang, who did a performance and like was talking in Spanish. You had, a black girl who was a poet. You had
Yeah, Amanda Gordon, shout out to her.
yes, yes,
Or
like
Gorman.
yes, yes, and you just had all of these different people and different cultures on the biggest stage in our country, and that was beautiful. But
Mhm.
I think for me, when I thought about the inauguration, it was like, this is a great first step, but like all this is symbolic,
Yeah.
diversity, and that doesn't necessarily tackle racism or get rid of racism. That's saying, hey, all of y'all should be able to come in the room and do your thing, which is great, but that's not the only thing that we have to worry about. I know for me, when I was thinking about the inauguration, I was thinking about white terrorists. I was thinking
Yeah.
about the people who had stormed Capitol Hill. I was thinking about the fact that even now with Biden and Harris sworn in, I'm still worried about their livelihoods, because I know that these domestic white terrorists are not necessarily being treated as terrorists like they should be, and I'm scared for my president and my VP. And so I don't know how to really feel about this day. Like it is a beautiful and glorious moment, but we still have to deal with the fact that tens of millions of people supported Trump, which means they probably supported to some extent his rhetoric and his values, and that's scary.
Yeah, yeah. And I really enjoy how you talked about like the inauguration and like the visual diversity, right? And I think that is part of Dr. King's dream, right? But
Right.
it's not the whole of it. I think that a lot of the times we just talk about this surface level optic, right? That like, oh, we have black people and white people in the same space. Kumbaya,
Ah,
kumbaya. And it's like, no, it's not that simple. It's not that simple at all. I think that when we think about his legacy, right, we talk about defeating poverty, right? He had the poor people's campaign. I think that's something big that people don't really talk about. He had the beloved community where everybody could live, right, but that they're contributing. It has socialistic values to it. So I think that those are things that are the legacy that people conveniently leave out. They only like the pacifist Dr. King. They don't like the we don't want this war, Dr. King. That white supremacy is a cancer to this nation, Dr. King. I think that those are big things, and it's like when people look at the inauguration, they look at where the country is. I do think it is beautiful that that you can. So what is it? 50, 60 years later, we can fast forward 60 years later or rewind 60 years later and look across where like from they're across from where he gave his speech. And I think that to me is symbolic. It's like, okay, you travel how many so miles to this spot right across, but you also travel 60 years and it's a completely different life. I think that, yeah, um, Vice President Harris won't, she doesn't have the same politic as Dr. King, right? I don't know if he would have been for locking parents up for truancy, right? For putting other black people in jail. I don't know if that would have been his politic, but I do think that built into that is the ability to transcend to those levels. That I think it would have been his wildest dream that somebody could be the vice president, that somebody could be a black person, could be the president. I think that those are really powerful things, but again, those are symbolic. Um, Shout out to moms too, because I she got me these Martin Luther King records for Christmas, and I have and Bay brought me a record player. I've been just listening to some of his older speeches and some of the speeches that aren't often played. And I think, okay, we hear, I've been to the mountaintop. That's a real big one. Where he kind of prophetically like he proclaims that, like, I'm not gonna get there with you, but I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land. Y'all got to keep fighting. Y'all got to, the marathon continues, right? I think we hear it in so many different ways. Like Nipsey said it to us, in different words, but it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, I'm not gonna be here to run this whole race with you, but it's gonna exist. But there was another one that I listened to. It's called the Drum Major Instinct, and it's pretty biblical, and he talks about how it's two of the disciples told Jesus that they wanted to be his right and left hand. And a lot of people kind of sneer at that, like, why you want glory for yourself? And he was pretty much saying that, like, it's okay to want glory. It's okay to want to be great, but be great for other people, right? Don't be great for yourself. Be great and change the world. And I think that that's something else in his legacy that people forget. And that's what I want to challenge Joe Biden and that administration to do, is to think about those programs and stuff that he fought for. Coming off of this weekend, like, think about all of those things that, like, historically people have been pushing for, like Medicare for all. Like, that's something we need, especially in coronavirus. um it's not on the table just yet, but I think that at least the cancellation of student debt. Um, there are, what else is he thinking about doing? Raising the federal minimum wage, and that's something we also could talk about. I think that was a big debate. People don't want to see a $15 minimum wage, but that's something we definitely saw at the Poor People Campaign. So I think that there are contradictions amongst not just us, but also in the government. It's like we hail Dr. King and his ideas, but then when $15 for minimum wage come up, people are like, oh no, we don't want to get no burger flip or no $15. But those same people are those essential workers that we needed in at the heart of the pandemic. So yeah, it's just a bunch of different thoughts.
Well, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that I love what you said about the mountaintop, portion of the speech that King gave, because you made me think about, when, like, just by you mentioning it made me think about something that I've never thought about before. When he makes that speech, the assumption is that we are going to make it to the mountaintop. But if people had the mentality that MLK had, where it was like, a mountaintop exists. I'm not going to make it there with you, but I'm going to help you get closer to that, to the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that everyone thinks of social justice as, all we need to do is to make it to one point and everything will be perfect forever. But MLK dedicated his life to knowing he was not going to get to that mountaintop, but knowing that he was going to fight to the bone to get us as high as possible. And I think that
Absolutely.
if more people took on that mentality, right, then we would be so much farther as a nation. If a white person came and said, "Hey, Ashton, like, I'll never understand this racism thing. I'll always have some problems with, like, race issues, but I'm going to do my best and push myself for the entirety of my life." If us as men said, "Hey, women, like, there will always be parts of us that are a little bit sexist. We'll always be having to work on it, but we're going to push ourselves for the rest of our lives to get better." We as a country would just be so much further. if if, hey, I don't understand all the poor man's troubles, but you know what, I'm going to fight for this minimum wage to go up to $15 an hour, and I'm going to try to understand you and your situation for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's humanity. When you're like, I'm never going to be
Absolutely.
perfect, but I'm going to fight for humanity,
Yeah.
until my last breath. And I think that that's what Dr. King stood for. So I think as a country, we have to be like, I'm not trying to necessarily get to the mountaintop. I'm just trying to push the next generation even closer to it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you right now and what you described is really what a real ally is, right? Is when you're willing to struggle with someone and it's not necessarily your fight. That's what ally is. When we think about allyship, like, ally is in war. That's what I think of. That's the first thing I think of, is like the US had allies in World War II. It's like, if I'm bucking and you bucking too. And it's like it might not, you might not have nothing to do with it, but it's like we partners.
Right.
And that's what that reminds me um of Joe Biden's speech. I don't really remember much of it, to be so true. To be so true, I'm a sucker for uh charismatic leadership. So it's like he didn't really have no juice to me. He didn't have no juice. But what I did remember him saying is talking about unity. Unity kept coming up. It kept coming up as if we're a divided nation. And we are. But I think that unity isn't as simple as he made it out to be, but it can be as beautiful as you described. It's like if you are willing to get uncomfortable and get in the mud, get it out the mud with your ally, with your person, then it's like then we really can't we can make a change. But until then, it's like we're kind of fighting these separate battles and we're losing the war. So yeah, I just think that that was beautiful because it's like we do need each other in the end, but it's like we have to know we were on the same team. It's like in a track meet, he says it's like I'm thinking Nipsey's like the marathon continues, and that's kind of what Martin Luther King is doing. But it's like it's also a relay. It's like we're not running a leg of we're running a leg of the race. We're not just running for ourselves. So yeah, I think that those are just real things that I think about, especially when we're thinking about like the inauguration and what else there is, um, what we can expect coming up.
No, well, well, first of all, absolutely. It is one of those things where, unity right now is lip service, and Trump gave us enough lip service that was toxic and divisive, and so with Biden, I'm not gung ho about the inauguration. It like you said, it feels different, but I will get more excited if Biden shows us unity in his actions and his policies, and denouncing things that actually try to attack the unity of this nation. And so, as we try to heal, I am going to be watching Biden. And I'm going to be watching, Harris as well, because they're both on the line here, and they're both going to have to be held accountable, right? Because our nation is hurting.